and welcome to the ALCSI podcast, where we share the stories of lung cancer patients and their caregivers, as well as the work of doctors and researchers in the field. Today, we have the great honor and privilege of having Miss Liz Brown with us. Liz is 47 and a childhood cancer survivor since 1989. She's diagnosed with radiation-induced adenocarcinoma in 2019, almost 30 years after receiving radiation therapy. She has documented her experiences on social media and her blog to help spread awareness on the late effects of radiation and cancer. Liz, thank you so much for your time and your willingness to be here with us. We're so excited to have you today.
Thank you for inviting me.
To introduce myself and my team, my name is Priyanka Senthil, and with me I have Samir Bajaj, and we're part of the American Lung Cancer Screening Initiative, or ALCSI for short. And we would like to take a few minutes to share about our organization and introduce lung cancer and lung cancer screening. ALCSI is a 501c3 nonprofit that works to raise awareness about lung cancer and lung cancer screening, and we're a team of over 200 students and doctors located across the United States. We do the work that we do because lung cancer is the deadliest cancer in the world, causing more deaths than breast, prostate, and colon cancers combined. Lung cancer causes about 380 deaths per day in the US alone. And lung cancer is very fatal because currently many patients are being diagnosed at a late stage when the cancer has grown and spread to other parts of the body. But lung cancer screening is an effective imaging technique that can be used to screen for lung cancer and has been shown to catch lung cancers early. However, less than 6% of people at high risk for lung cancer are currently getting screened. And the screening rate for lung cancer is much lower than the screening rates for breast, cervical, and colon cancers, which are about 70%. We believe that educating people about lung cancer screening is one of the most important and effective ways to increase the lung cancer screening rate for populations that would benefit from lung cancer screening. And so far, we've given over 250 presentations on lung cancer screening to universities, hospitals, medical schools, and organizations around the US, as well as Canada, Brazil, and Mexico, reaching over 10,000 people. And over the last year, we worked with over 345 mayors from every single US state to issue proclamations recognizing November as National Lung Cancer Awareness Month. We've also had the opportunity to work with several leaders at the state level, including multiple mayors, Arizona State Senator Leila Alston, who's a lung cancer survivor, Pennsylvania Governor Tom Wolf, and Lieutenant Governor of Colorado Diane Primavera, to issue public service announcements emphasizing the importance of lung cancer screening. In addition to our education, outreach, and advocacy efforts, we recently started this podcast series to share the personal side of lung cancer and provide a platform for lung cancer survivors, doctors, and advocates to share their stories and experiences in the field. And ALCSI has also worked with US Congress members and senators to draft and advocate for the first ever House and Senate resolutions, recognizing the importance of the early detection of lung cancer through screening. And in December 2022, the US Senate passed a bipartisan resolution for the third year in a row, designating November 2022 as National Lung Cancer Awareness Month and expressing support for the early detection and treatment of lung cancer. This Senate Resolution 863, expands on previous resolutions by emphasizing the need for efforts to increase awareness of screening among veterans, women, and racial minorities. And ALCSI has also actively worked with Representative Brennan Boyle and Senators Tina Smith to draft and advocate for Catherine's Law for Lung Cancer Early Detection and Survival Act of 2021. And so lastly, we want to end by talking a little bit about lung cancer screening. So lung cancer screening is done using a low-dose computed tomography scan. And this scan uses low radiation doses, is pain-free, and takes less than 5 minutes to complete. In the US, the United States Preventive Services Task Force, also known as the USPSTF, sets guidelines for who should be screened for lung cancer. And right now, they recommend that people between the ages of 50 and 80 who have a 20-pack-year smoking history or more, and who currently smoke or have quit within the past 15 years, get annual low-dose CT scans. 1 pack year is defined as smoking on average 1 pack a day for 1 year, and so 20 pack years can be met in a multitude of ways, including smoking 1 pack a day for 20 years or 2 packs a day for 10 years, for example. If you know anyone who might be eligible for lung cancer screening based on the criteria discussed, please encourage them to take our lung cancer screening eligibility survey at www.alcsai.org so that they can learn whether they're eligible and have the opportunity to connect with their team at ALCSI to guide them through the screening process. And finally, we want to highlight there are other risk factors for lung cancer in addition to smoking, such as exposure to asbestos, a family history of lung cancer, COPD, and previous radiation therapy to the lungs. And we believe that it is important that we recognize these additional risk factors because a large number of people in the US and around the world who are diagnosed with lung cancer have never smoked. So thank you all for taking the time to listen to that quick introduction to lung cancer and lung cancer screening. And without further ado, we'll jump right into the podcast. We have a couple of questions prepared for Liz, but we also have a Q&A session at the end with questions submitted from our previous audience. So first off, Liz, can you please tell us more about yourself and your lung cancer journey?
So, as you said, I'm 47 and I'm based in Yorkshire in the UK. I had cancer at 14 in my spine, and part of my treatment was radiotherapy. It was very aggressive radiation at the time, and they didn't really know if I'd survive or not. So it was worth to do that, and that was fine. I had never ever had an idea that the radiation therapy would actually affect my lungs in any way, and I didn't really, as I say, have anything to do with it until 2019. I was very lucky because in the UK, our kind of long-term follow-up for childhood cancer survivors isn't that great. But I had been sent to a really good doctor, and she'd sort of said, we need to do some screening because of the treatment you've had, so we need to do some monitoring. And one of those things she said was, we need to do a CT scan of your chest just to check your lungs. When after I'd had that first kind of baseline monitoring, she came back to me and she said, how long have you had radiation damage to your lungs? And I sort of said, what radiation damage? I don't know what you mean. She said, well, the tops of both of your lungs are incredibly scarred, and you've got sort of nodules in there that are classic with radiation damage from obviously my radiotherapy, which by that point was exactly 30 years previously. I had no idea about this at all. So it was just, the plan was to monitor it. I'd never had any problems with my lungs. I've never had any problems with my breathing. And so that must have been, I think that was 2016. So it was a couple of years later, just a normal regular monitoring scan. And she just called me up afterwards, the oncologist, and said, yeah, those nodules we've been watching have started to grow, and they'd got satellite ones that had gone off to other areas of my lungs. So she sort of said straight away, we think it's cancer. It looks classically like cancer. You're going to need an operation. So it was a little bit of a whirlwind, really. No idea this was going to come out of the blue. I think I found it hard to be told I had cancer again. That definitely threw me for a while because of the link back to being sort of having cancer as a child. And this was obviously 2019. This was November, and we tried to do some biopsies, but because my lungs are so damaged from the radiotherapy, they really couldn't get any good biopsy results. They couldn't really get into there. I've got quite bad scarring and fibrosis in there. I don't know if you know about fibrosis, but that affects me quite badly. Sorry, as well, I should say I'm quite breathless. So then in January of 2020, I had a thoracotomy, had the top lung from this top lobe from my right lung removed, and then the lower lobe from my right lung removed. So I've got the middle one still. I didn't even know we had 3 lobes in one and 2 in the other. And then that was a big operation because obviously, again, I've got so much scarring inside that there was no chance of any keyhole surgery. It was and then in the March, literally 2 weeks before we went on complete lockdown for COVID, I started chemo. Had 6 rounds of chemo to sort of mop up anything that, if there was anything left off, and that's where I've been since. I have 2 nodules in my left lung, which are being watched, and I have been told they are fully expecting them at some point to probably start growing, which is why they'd said if I hadn't had these nodules, they would have just removed my entire right lung. But because they expect me to probably have to have surgery again in the future, they've left me this lung. You know, they've left me some lungs. So if they do have to take some more away, I'm still going to have quality of life. So that's really what happened with me. I had no idea about the depths of radiation damage. I had no idea there was anything wrong with my lungs. I had no symptoms. So obviously to find out I had lung cancer and really didn't have any symptoms, I had to go through quite extensive tests beforehand of lung function to work out whether I would still have enough quality of life and lung function after the operation, which thankfully I do. Yeah. I mean, I struggle to breathe a lot. I find anything that's exertion, it takes me a while for my breathing to recover. But yeah, we are getting there.
No, and thank you for sharing that. It's really remarkable that you didn't have any symptoms that sort of came out of the blue. And you described it as sort of experiencing a whirlwind. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about what was going on in your mind when you got that lung cancer diagnosis and how that experience with lung cancer compared with your experience surviving childhood cancer.
That's a really good question. Now, my experience of childhood cancer, I very much, you have to remember it was 1989 and we didn't talk about mental health. So physical health was very much dealt with, but the mental health side of it really was kind of brushed under the carpet. And I did the same thing. So I kind of was very much in sort of denial or disassociation about my childhood cancer experiences. I'd started to get late effects and was getting these looked at, but I was very much still struggling to accept what had happened to me. So it was kind of, I have cancer again. And that I think really threw me because I knew what was coming. I think that was the issue, was I knew what was going to be happening. I knew I was going to be in hospital. You know, I knew I was going to be having numerous medical procedures, you know, and not all of them are painful, but medical procedures can put you back to, if you've been there before, it puts you straight back to it. So I very much felt for a while that I had one foot in 1989 as a 14-year-old and one foot in 2019 as a sort of 44-year-old. And I did find it really hard. Luckily, I had some good therapy and utilizing that to sort of, and social media as well, actually, the using kind of other cancer patients and being able to talk about it really did make a difference. But I think it was a kind of a sink or swim moment, and I was either going to sink because it really did. They messed me up a little bit, or you know, I can just try and fight it and keep going. And I think I just thought, okay, I've done this before, I can do it. But I did struggle, definitely, especially the night before my surgery. I had a very, very understanding surgeon who normally you would have to be obviously in hospital the night before your surgery. And I have a lot of complex PTSD from medical trauma, and staying overnight in the hospital is a really big deal for me because as a child, I actually got diagnosed on my 14th birthday. So on my 14th birthday, I ended up in a hospital and didn't leave for 4 months. So there's very much a thing of when I'm in a hospital, they're not going to let me go home again. I'm going to be stuck here for months again because that was all I knew. Whenever you go to hospital, all they do is they keep hurting you and they don't let you go home. And I felt very vulnerable. And they actually let me stay at home the night before my surgery, you know, on the condition I followed, you know, the no eating, the no drinking after midnight. And I think I was there at something like 7 o'clock. I was there at the crack of dawn the next morning. But just having kind of doctors that understood my situation and to just let me stay at home that night before made a big difference. But I do remember just waves of just pure fear, you know, and saying even to the anaesthetist as I was going to surgery, I don't want to do this. I've done it before. I don't want to do it. I'm frightened, you know. And I think in a strange way, it's actually helped me with my healing. But at the time, it really did turn my world upside down. I didn't really know how to cope with it.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your experience and feelings. I really can't imagine what it might have felt to receive the second cancer diagnosis, and especially when it kind of came out of the blue, as you said, with no symptoms. And I'm sure lung cancer was never on your radar, and so it probably swept you off your feet. So, and you talked about how back in 1989 there was not as much focus on mental health, and could you share some of the strategies that you might have used to get through some particular difficult times during either of your cancer journeys, your childhood cancer or your lung cancer?
My childhood cancer one, as I say, mental health. I mean, it wasn't so much, there wasn't a lot. It was just not discussed, full stop. How you were feeling was never asked. Everything was very much physical because that's what we all knew back then. And I think, which is why I kind of, I mean, the honest answer back then was that I couldn't, I needed a reason for having cancer, and I couldn't, there was no reason. So I decided that it must be that I was a bad person and I deserved it. So that's what had happened. So obviously that's not very good mental health coping strategies at all. And I think from that, because that was too much to deal with, I just went into I just pretended it hadn't happened. I couldn't see my scar because it's obviously on my back. It was in my spine. So I didn't have any physical symptoms I could see. So I just disassociated from it. This time round, how do, I think I just went with the thought of I have no choice. There is nothing I can, when people say, "Oh, you're so brave," it's not bravery. You have no choice. You know, I knew I just kept getting up every morning and putting one foot in front of the other. Before I knew it, I would get to that surgery date and it would be done. And I just went very much into dealing with one day at a time. Um, it's, because that was all I could do. I couldn't look to the future because I didn't know what the future would hold. And obviously, getting a further cancer from the treatment that originally saved your life then threw me into what does the future hold? What's next? I mean, I do have nodules in my thyroid as well that we watch. So it was a case of, okay, now I know it can happen. What's the next thing that's going to happen? So I very much try and go with just one day at a time. But at the time when I had the diagnosis, I just had to just try and function day to day because, as I say, it was really big deal to try and get my head around. Especially just to add, with my lung cancer, COVID had hit, so I didn't have any family or anybody with me. I had to do it on my own.
No, certainly. I can't imagine how difficult that must have been. And I know that I want to talk a little bit more about your treatment. You mentioned that you
Yeah.
had received thoracotomy and about 6 rounds of chemo. If you feel comfortable sharing, I wanted to ask if you experienced any complications or side effects following your treatment.
Yes, I did. My thoracotomy, I struggled to heal from. I had my chest drain in for a week because we just couldn't stop. There was air in my chest cavity and we just couldn't get it out. No matter, they had me walking up and down the wards. They had me on a exercise bike to try, because they were saying we need to get the lung expanding to try and get the air out of there. And it just felt like no matter what I did, it didn't work. And I so desperately wanted the drain out because once the drain was out, I could go home. And obviously I was quite struggling with, I just need to get out of this hospital. So yeah, I ended up with a Bluetooth headband on my head, music on, and just walked up and down the ward all day long. And I'd say to them, "Please, is it working? Let me go home." And it did. But the chemo, I struggled with because I have radiation fibrosis. I have a lot of problems with my right arm. I could only have chemo in my left arm. The first round blew my veins, and I ended up with an awful. I think there's a name for it, but where all the inside of my vein was all kind of scarred from the chemo, and it was awful pain. So we then had to postpone my next rounds until I got a PICC line put in, which is like a obviously a line that goes into your arm. Do you call it a PICC line in America as well? Yeah. So once I had my line in, that made a huge difference. And I was quite poorly. I'm trying to remember the name of the chemo I had because the one I was supposed to have, I couldn't have because I already had so many health issues. But I was quite poorly. Yeah, I think I remember saying to somebody, "This is probably the worst hangover I've ever had," and I don't even drink anymore. I was like, "This is why I stopped drinking, and I've still got a hangover." I didn't lose my hair. Another misconception is, "Oh, you've not lost your hair. You can't have had chemo," because a lot of people don't realise that not every chemo you lose your hair with. I did. It did thin though, very much to the point that I mean, I did start wearing wigs, and I actually ended up wearing wigs for fun more than anything. And I just found ways to try and make it fun if I could, because I thought if I make it fun, it makes it easier to deal with. But yeah, I was sick. I was so sick. I had no appetite. I have a real sort of PTSD about being on steroids, and I was on steroids. So I've got my big steroid moon face, which kind of threw me back again into that 1989 kind of 14-year-old thing. But yeah, I just remember being so very, very sick on some days. And obviously I was still having to every day use my spirometer as well to try and expand my lungs. So I was trying to use that every day. So yeah, it was hard. I did find it hard, long, slow. And I'd have an intravenous chemo on day 1. And then on day 7, I'd have to take a tablet chemo. So just as I've got over the intravenous, I would take the tablet and then I'd have further side effects. Yeah, it was a long slog, it felt like.
Right. It sounds like you just kind of had to take each day as it came, and one foot in front of the other type of approach. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's an end in sight, so you just stick to that end route, and you sort of, and that's what I did with every round. It was like a one tick off the list, and I would treat myself to something every time I had a round of chemo. I think because we were into COVID lockdown and I certainly couldn't go to any shops. Going to the hospital meant that the hospital shop was open. So after I had my chemo, I would go to the hospital shop and I would chocolate and drinks, all the things that I'd been craving, like, I don't know, some cheese and onion crisps that I would just been absolutely craving. So that was my treat, was to go and get all the goodies.
Right. That's wonderful. And as you mentioned, I think when people hear about chemotherapy, there are a lot of misconceptions that come with it, with losing your hair and just feeling very weak. And I definitely think these are very common side effects that people unfortunately face. But with every patient that we've been able to talk with, and we've had the opportunity to hear their story about, and they've all had very different experiences with chemotherapy, immunotherapy, radiation. So I think it's very different and very patient specific.
Yeah, definitely.
And so you mentioned having significant radiation damage and fibrosis. And so for those who might not be familiar, could you just explain what radiation damage and fibrosis are?
Okay, so the way I describe fibrosis, and it's the only way I've ever been able to describe it that people understand, is if you blew up a balloon and then you put it in a cupboard and left it there for 20 years, when you open that cupboard door, the balloon will have collapsed and someone's going to ask you to try and blow it back up. But because it's been there for such a long time, it's got brittle and it's stuck together, and you can't really blow it back up again because it's all kind of stuck together and it's a big old mess. And that's something that radiation can do to your insides. It can affect your soft tissue, your nerves, your muscles, and it creates this fibrosis because it breaks down the cells, and then you lose. So, sorry, slight side note, I had hyperbaric oxygen chamber therapy at one point to try and reverse my fibrosis, because your cells collapse and the oxygen doesn't get into the cells so well because they're stuck together, and you can't force oxygen back into something that's all stuck and fused with itself. So that's really what the fibrosis is. But it means that, say, for some people to have lung surgery, it might be keyhole, because keyhole is amazing. But obviously for me, because my surgeon said that the biggest task for him with my surgery was trying to remove my lung from my chest wall, because they were just completely stuck to each other. He said, we couldn't just get it off in one go. He said we had to just work at it a bit at a time to sort of release it. So that's really what the fibrosis does. The radiation damage, again, the fibrosis is one of the biggest things it causes. But obviously, radiation can affect your cells and can sometimes cause further cancers later on in life, because it changes the DNA of your cells and things. And radiation carries on working. So a lot of people with radiation damage have no idea for 20 years that they've even got radiation damage, because it doesn't start showing for sometimes 20 years. Mine was 25 years after my radiation therapy was when I first had any indications that it was going to be causing me problems, and that was actually just skin cancers. So yeah, that's kind of, but obviously I know you can get lung fibrosis as well anyway, and it makes it harder to breathe because your lungs become sticky and they can't expand like they should be able to. So when you've had parts of your lungs removed already, and then what's left is sort of sticky and fibrosis, it makes everything quite hard.
No, certainly. And on this question of radiation, you were mentioning earlier that you had a really excellent GP who was able to help you and advocate that you get screened, right? Even though that the UK doesn't necessarily have really great long-term cancer follow-up. So I wanted to ask you what advice you might give to someone newly diagnosed, who what questions they should ask to their GP, or what should they prepare for in asking about sort of a new lung cancer diagnosis.
I don't really. I think if you've got a new lung cancer diagnosis, and you would be having radiation therapy for it, I think if you were having that, you need to be asking the questions about what are the long-term implications of this. I think people they need to be knowing that. I don't know if they're better now with it. I didn't have radiation therapy for my lung cancer, but I think it's going to be really important that they're really sort of open about the long-term implications of radiation, because again, it saved my life. So I would never say to somebody, oh, that's too bad, it might get you cancer later on in life, don't do it, because it did save my life. However, we need to be open and honest about what the implications can be, and I think we're learning. It's one of the reasons why I'm so vocal about what my story is, because if somebody else then thinks, I had radiation therapy 20 years ago, maybe I need to get checked out, maybe I need to have some screening, because it can happen. So I think it's just asking about the questions about the treatment you're having, and how will this affect me in 10 years time? Because people are you get, obviously with a cancer diagnosis, you're so stuck in the present of, okay, I have surgery, I'm going to have treatment, but we need to think about the future as well, and what it could happen to us in the future, definitely. So I don't think that was a very good answer, but
no, that is really great advice. Thank you for sharing. I think it's hard when you receive a diagnosis like that of lung cancer, or just cancer in general, a big diagnosis that is really life altering, to kind of figure out what questions to ask in that moment. And so it's very difficult, I think, to know what to ask, to think about, to go beyond the present, the diagnosis, and to think about the future, when even the future itself is maybe unclear for yourself, for the doctor. So.
Yeah, exactly, that's the thing. Like, when I knew I was going to have chemo, I quizzed my consultant about what are the long-term effects of this, will it affect anything else, and he was sort of saying, and I said, only because I know from my radiation damage this can happen. So I was like, I want to know if this is going to be messing me up in 10 years time, and if it is, I accept that. I just think forewarned is forearmed. If we know what's to come, we can deal with it. That's my biggest thing is, you need to know what could happen. Yeah.
Right. And so during our discussion earlier, you mentioned the importance of being your own advocate, and you mentioned wanting to go home, wanting to leave the hospital as soon as possible, and kind of working with your team to figure out how you could make that happen. And so
yeah,
could you share a little bit about how patients can be their own advocates in their cancer journey?
I think the biggest thing for me is to know your normal, know what's normal for you. And I think when you know what's normal for you, when something is different, and it's really hard. I actually put a question out on Twitter a few days ago and said, as people out there who are at the moment no evidence of disease, how hard do you find it to go to the doctors about other things? And me personally, I flip between, I'm either the best advocate for myself, I will be at the doctors and say, this is wrong, this is not right, something's going on, I need to get it checked out. But then if I get a good appointment, and I get a doctor who sort of listens to me, I feel confident to go back. But if I get a doctor who sort of shrugs me off, or doesn't seem to be really taking me seriously, it can knock my confidence. And then I can find that I struggle to go back to the GP about things, because I don't want to be a burden, and I don't want to. So I think it's knowing what's normal for you and trying to be on top of things. I am the worst person sometimes for letting things slide, and I'm either a really good advocate for myself or a terrible advocate for myself, normally depending on my mental health. But it is, and you have to be resilient. I think that's the thing. A lot of people think that once you have cancer, appointments are given to you, and it's like, you need to come back now and do this, you need to come back. It doesn't always work like that. So sometimes you have to fight, you have to fight a little bit to get these appointments, to get seen. And it can be exhausting. It can be really hard work sometimes to constantly keep having to sort of fight to get seen by different, especially when you have different departments, because cancer can affect you in so many different ways, and you end up with different areas of your body being affected that maybe didn't have the cancer. So I think it's about the resilience, and I guess more than anything else, knowing what's normal for your body, and if it's something that, okay, this isn't right. I mean, I've sometimes had to go and ask silly questions where I've had a really issue with my heart at the moment. My heartbeat is through the roof all the time. And eventually I did go to the doctors and said, I don't know why this is doing this. He said, well, you've only got one lung. He said, your heart will be working extra. But of course, until I had that told to me, and I am still waiting to have a heart trace to have my heart checked. But until he sort of explained that, I was panicking. Is there something wrong with my heart now as well? So yeah, but you always feel better once you've got something looked at, definitely. But yeah, resilience, you have to just be resilient with it.
No, I think the point about resilience is really important. Taking every day as it is, as Priyanka was mentioning, and then really being ready to roll with the punches in some way, right? And then being able to show up and ask the questions. So, I want to go back to that point about lung cancer screening that you were describing and how you're able to get that CT scan for your chest. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about what lung cancer screening looks like in the UK. Is there a formal program or national guidelines in the US? I wanted to ask you a little bit more about that.
Now, this is where I probably should have looked into this a little bit more, but I will tell you what I know from my opinion of as far as I know, there isn't a lung cancer screening initiative in the UK. There isn't a set of rules that, like, you have your certain criteria. If you fit this criteria, you are eligible. As far as I know, that doesn't exist. In the UK, it's very much centered on symptoms. We have a lot of public health awareness and advertisements about, if you have a persistent cough that doesn't go, you need to go and get it checked out. So it's more about, if you show symptoms, you need to go to the doctors, and and they will. And we have it's called 2-week waiting. So anything that's suspected that could be to do with cancer, you can get pushed for a 2-week appointment to get seen within 2 weeks. But no, we don't actually have, as far as I know, I don't think we have a kind of screening initiative. It's very much on you to notice your symptoms and then go and ask to be sort of looked at, or at least checked out. I think the doctors are very good with, people that come, especially with a history of smoking, and in that age group with a persistent cough, they're probably likely to, you'd get sent for an X-ray first, I guess, to rule out a chest infection and things like that. And then we'd go on to, your CT scans. I had an X-ray, a CT scan, a PET scan, and then obviously they try to do is a robot guided biopsy, which they couldn't do because I have a huge lump of metal holding my spine together, and apparently the metal would throw the robot off in the wrong way. But we do have, once you're into that pathway of having it checked out, is very good. But I think it's getting on the pathway. There's no kind of screening rules. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I think that in the past, screening for lung cancer has never been offered in the UK because previously the evidence wasn't very clear. But I know that they've had some targeted lung health checks as a pilot just in some areas of the UK, and I believe it started in 2019. And so now they've been able to collect a little bit of evidence from these pilot studies, and they found that screening people at high risk for lung cancer does save lives, and that for high risk individuals, the benefits do outweigh any harms that might come with the low radiation exposures from CT scans. And so the UK National Screening Committee, they are an independent organization, and they have a variety of research trials going on. And so right now, I think they are inviting individuals between the ages 55 and 74, and individuals who either smoke or used to smoke to get screened. So hopefully more to come on that.
It sounds like we're getting there. Yes,
Yes.
we are getting there. We're always a bit slower. It takes us a while to catch up.
And so I wanted to ask you, just kind of changing gears here a little bit, about what motivates you to share your lung cancer story publicly, because I'm sure, I'm sure it's difficult to recollect, what you were feeling at the time of getting diagnosed, and just, the whole journey. I'm sure it's not an easy one to recollect and share. And so could you talk a little bit more about what motivates you? And then maybe also, I know you're doing a lot in the field of raising awareness about lung cancer through your social media, and so we'd love to hear about that as well.
It motivates me because I think I know. I mean, I used to be a teacher, so I know how to talk. I mean, to be fair, I just know I'm good at talking. I love social media. I love the ability to connect with people from all over the world. And I think one of the things is because I don't look like a cancer patient. I don't look like somebody who's got or had lung cancer. And I think a lot of the time I like to share it because it's a kind of a look, I'm still out there, I'm still living. It's a positive story because, I have been through some pretty rough stuff cancer wise, but I'm still out here, I'm still living. I can't walk as far as I could, but I can still do it. And I think it's about showing people that there's hope, and showing people that you can get through I've just connected with somebody yesterday who is in America, and he's just had the same surgery that I did. And he was sort of saying he's got his spirometer, and what am I doing? And I just said, keep going every day with it, because it will make a difference. And because I've been there and I've walked the road, and I'm quite happy to talk about it. So I think it's just because I am able to talk about it quite well. I just thought I need to use this. And obviously cancer's taken my career again. I can't go back to working, so I really struggle with finding a purpose. So if my purpose is to use what I've been through to help others, show them it can be done, then I will do it all day long. Because if I know I've helped somebody else, it makes what I've been through worth it. So maybe it's slightly selfish, but but that's the way I do it. I think because people get surprised when I say. Sometimes people think, oh, I'm a childhood cancer survivor with the bone cancer in her back. And then when I say about my lungs as well, and it's like, oh wow, you look so well. And I'm like, you can recover from this. I think a lot of people think as well with lung cancer that that's it. You're going to be hooked up to an oxygen machine for the rest of your life, and you're not going to be able to, get out and do things. And I can travel. I love music. Live music is my passion. And I still go to concerts. I can't jump up and down and sing along to the bands any longer because my lungs just won't let me do it. The last concert I went to, I ended up having to stop. I was like, I think I'm going to be sick. I just can't breathe. However, you just make it work, and it's showing people that it's not the end of the world. It doesn't mean that your life is over. Yes, it's hard. Nobody's saying it's easy, but you can get through it, and I think that's one of the reasons. And also because I'm so open and honest about everything, people know they can ask me anything and I'll always answer. So if somebody has a question somebody was asking me recently about chest drains, and sort of saying, does anybody actually really cope with them? And I said, no, it's normal. It's normal to be having a drain hanging out you and saying, this is not good, this is horrible, I don't want this. So maybe I think that's why I do it. It's like I'm showing people that you can get through it. Yeah. And you can live again afterwards.
I think it is really a public service that you're so willing to be open with your story, with your narrative, and to show people that they can get through this, and that there is hope, there is a way to live with lung cancer and survive it. So, I want to ask you more directly then, like we have a large community of lung cancer survivors and patients who listen to this podcast. I want to ask you, what is your message for them?
Congratulations on getting through that surgery, for one. Anybody who gets through that surgery that I had, I just think, do you know what? It's like we're all out there. We're all out there with our missing bits of lungs and our scars. and our trauma that we've been through, but we've been through it and we've got through it. And I think that's the most important thing, is that, and we're still finding ways to live. We can still get out there. I have to park a little bit nearer where I go now because I can't walk as far, but I still go there. And it's just about, we're all out there still living, and we're not letting it ruin our lives. We're not letting it hold us back. We're just maybe sometimes having to adjust the way we do things. That I always say, there is no harm in having to make adjustments. If it makes it work for you, then adjust it. My daughter laughs at me sometimes at the things I do to like get around doing things. Going to the supermarket, I always get a trolley, whether I'm going to buy one item or 10, because leaning on a trolley and pushing a trolley around helps me because I've got something to lean on. It's just about, it's like, absolutely, we're all out there and we're all still doing it. And I think we should be really proud of ourselves, because it's a brutal surgery, especially if you have to have a thoracotomy. It is brutal, but it's done, and we're healing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you said that very well. We were talking with another lung cancer patient a couple of days ago, and they were saying, they had a choice of either, kind of sitting in the corner and worrying about what the future is going to be like, and just
Yeah.
whether they'll how the operation will go, and just thinking about and thinking and worrying about what the future will be like, and I'm sure everyone, it'll cross their mind, it'll cross people's mind at some point, and I don't think worrying is unavoidable, but they also have the option of just getting up and doing the things that you like, and that you enjoy, being with family, spending time with
Yeah.
friends, and figuring out how you can continue to live life, and also deal with lung cancer as it comes. So
Yeah, absolutely. Worrying is normal. Like, the people who sort of say, oh, you just mustn't think about it, be positive. Positive thinking won't stop it recurring. If it's going to recur, it's going to recur. I think that's my way of looking at it, is now, if something's going to come back, it'll come back regardless of what I do. And sitting worrying and causing stress and upset when actually we've still got this life. I'm very much a believer in that, it's not about, I've got a second chance at life, I need to be doing all these wonderful things. That's the other thing. Don't feel that pressure. There's always a lot of pressure to be super cancer survivor. I survived cancer, and now I've jumped out of the plane and I've raised $50,000 for this, and I've done this many things, and I've just that many things. Actually, just living, that makes you a super cancer survivor. The fact that you're out there and you're still living, yeah, yeah. Be kind to yourselves. You've been through a lot.
right, absolutely. And so this is a similar question, but now for individuals who might have a loved one, who might have been recently diagnosed with lung cancer. And so do you have any advice for them? So for anyone who has family members or friends or just loved ones who are diagnosed with lung cancer?
Yeah, just be gentle with them, but try and encourage the getting up and about. That, I think getting up and about and moving is so important after the surgery, most definitely. But it is very much small baby steps at first. But be gentle and encourage that movement. It's very easy when someone's poorly to sort of want to just turn into a complete caregiver and do everything for them. But actually, for us, it's so important to keep moving, that it's more about encouraging us to be able to do things independently again ourselves. I think that's really important. My mum wanted to do everything for me. I wanted a cup of coffee, and I'll go and put the kettle on. And I was like, no, you can lift the kettle and fill it, but let me go and make my own drink, because I need to keep moving. Oh, no, 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 you stay there, you sit down. No, I need to stand up and keep walking around. I would go to the shop for something, and she'd say, we don't need to. I know, but I want to just walk, just slowly, just to try and get out there. Yeah. So it's sort of working with them. It's very easy to say, to want to kind of just say, you sit, you rest, you get better. But actually, especially with the lungs, resting is good, but we also need to keep moving. Yeah. And it's hard because you don't want to, but it helps you and you'll benefit so much from it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Liz, for taking the time to answer all the questions that we've had so far. It's been really a great pleasure being able to talk with you. We'll now transition to our the couple questions that we've had submitted from our general public. And so our first audience question that we have is, do you have any advice for people looking to get involved in the lung cancer community?
Find the organizations first of all, like you guys, and then go from there. Like every single organization wants volunteers, they want patient experiences, they want to hear about lived experiences. So put yourself out there. I mean, it is that thing. Sometimes I've talked about things where I've contacted an organization and said, this is my story, would you want to hear it? Can I help you in any way? You know, and keep talking about it. I think talking about it opens up so many doors sometimes that you don't realize, just by people sort of go, oh, you know, they have lung cancer, they want to help other people and they're willing to talk about it. Yeah, keep talking. Definitely.
Certainly. And another question we had from the audience was, we have this issue that a lot of people don't know about lung cancer screening. A lot of people know about mammograms or colonoscopies. So how do you think we can best educate the upcoming generation about lung cancer screening?
I don't really, I guess it's just the more it gets out there, in your public health programs, the advertising, social media as well. Social media is fantastic now for getting health awareness out there. And I think it is just a case of keep pushing it out there all the time, because people will get to that age where, and also if you're advertising to all ages, you might have someone who says, actually, my mum fits into that screening initiative. I need to get my mum to do it. So sometimes the younger generation are better at pushing the older generation into things. So it's not just putting it out there for that age group, get it out to everybody. The more people need to realize that, yes, obviously smoking is the biggest cause, of lung cancer, but there's other causes as well. And it's, so many people who've had lung cancer have never smoked a cigarette in their life, have never been near secondhand smoke. It's not, there's a lot of stigma. It's it's going slowly now, thankfully. But we have the Royal Castle Lung Foundation in the UK, which Roy Castle was an entertainer who was on the UK TV in the 70s, the 80s. He never smoked a cigarette in his life. He had lung cancer, and they said it came from the working men's clubs he worked in, where all of the audience was that smoking, the secondhand smoke every evening. But yeah, there's so much stigma about it as well. And there shouldn't be a stigma, but we just need to be pushing it out there everywhere. It's, the screening's available, it's there. And for me, if I hadn't had, obviously mine was the monitoring, but it would have come under the screening. If I hadn't had that, how far gone would it be before we picked it up? Because I had no symptoms. Yeah. And I lost most of my right lung with no symptoms. If I'd had symptoms, how bad would it have gone? Would it have spread? Would it have metastasized? And that's the thing. Things that are caught earlier can be dealt with. Like me, I'm still up and about, but if been left too late, would I still be here? Yeah.
Yeah, I think you hit on several really key points there. Well, when you mentioned social media, right now with TikTok and just Instagram, Twitter, all these social media platforms being used a lot, I think there's a lot of opportunities for us to share about lung cancer screening through short videos, through just posts to help raise awareness. And I know a lot of doctors and even other lung cancer organizations are sharing this information on social media, and the engagement with that has been really wonderful. And people like yourself, lung cancer survivors who are willing to share their story publicly and be a resource for individuals who might be going through something similar. That is so, I think, so special with social media. And then you also mentioned raising awareness among everyone, not just individuals who might meet the eligibility for lung cancer screening. And that's something that we really believe at the American Lung Cancer Screening Initiative, is because if we're able to get information about lung cancer screening out to everyone, there's a high likelihood that someone might know a family member or friend or colleague or coworker who might meet the lung cancer screening criteria, and can really encourage them to get screened. And especially with students, students really influence the healthcare of their parents. And so we can really, it doesn't have to be just a direct outreach. It can also be, indirect through just making use of the networks and ties of everyone in the community. So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I spent yesterday with my daughter, she's 24, and I was quite out of breath by the time we got anywhere. And, she said, are your lungs worse? Do you need to go back to the doctors and get them checked? And I was like, no, this is just what they always like, but that was her first thing, was she was like, Mum, do you need to go and get checked out again? And yeah, I think, just getting it out to everyone, definitely, yeah.
right.
And
Yeah,
also,
and it
as I
just
say, the other thing, infographics. Infographics, just simple infographics are great.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things that we're trying to do, and I know a lot of other organizations are trying to do, is just to try to get these infographics and posters up in even just like coffee shops or places where
Yeah.
where the general community members visit. And even if we in subways and in just areas where there's a lot of people, a lot of foot traffic, I think that's that can really help just raise awareness about lung cancer screening, because some people haven't heard about lung cancer screening, and at least just
No.
a poster on lung cancer screening, even if they don't have a chance to maybe read the entire poster, just hearing about lung cancer screening can educate people about that there is an option like this that exists.
Inside of the toilet doors, that's always for some reason, that people say, oh, I saw this poster on the back of the toilet door when I went to some public toilets the other day. Yeah,
Right.
those things, because it just sticks in your mind, and then later on you go, oh, actually, I remember I saw that earlier. It's
Right.
just popping it in people's brain, isn't it? Mm.
Right. Yeah. And just being able to talk about lung cancer screening more publicly, I think that can start to address the stigma that you mentioned, because there unfortunately still continues to be a stigma around lung cancer and the way we talk about lung cancer. And so just increasing communication about lung cancer screening, raising awareness that lung cancer can affect anyone with lungs. Individuals don't have to have a smoking history. And as we talked about, there are other risk factors for lung cancer. So
and actually, even if somebody has got a smoking history, there's still no stigma, because for a lot of people who fit that criteria, when they started smoking, the health implications weren't as well known. And we know that tobacco is one of the most addictive substances ever. So, this is people that smoking was glamorous at one point. These people who have these lifelong addictions have maybe smoked their entire life because when they started, it was something that was cool and glamorous. There's no stigma, there shouldn't be a stigma, even because you get that all the time. When I say I had lung cancer, people will go, oh, did you smoke? And and then sometimes you'll get people go, well, it was your own fault. And it's like, no, actually I didn't smoke, I had radiation. But I know of people who have smoked, had lung cancer, and been told, well, they've no sympathy, you brought it on yourself. And that's not fair, because we didn't know back then what we know now.
yeah, exactly. And especially with racial minorities, like they were disproportionately targeted with tobacco advertising. And so there are a lot of disparities that go
and that's another actually really important thing with the we call it in the UK the BAME, so it's the Black ethnic minorities. A lot of people don't want to talk about health there. It's an area where we really need to push the screening and the awareness more, because in some cultures and some areas, health and the health issues aren't spoken about as openly as they are in others. So it's just knowing to get it out to everybody.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned, smoking cessation is not an issue of like willpower or desire to quit smoking. And, it's tobacco is a very addictive substance, and it's, there's a lot of physical, mental, emotional side effects that can come from trying to quit smoking. And I think it's difficult for people who might not be dealing with that addiction to kind of understand it's more than just a would desire to quit smoking, or how much an individual wants to quit.
Yeah.
And so our next question is, what are you looking forward to most in the next few months?
Me personally, in my life?
Yes.
Well, I'm getting married in August, so I'm very much looking forward to that.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
I say I've just moved. I'm looking forward to the summer. I'm looking forward to, because we're in the UK, it's not very warm yet. I mean, the sun has started coming out, but it's still cold. I'm just looking forward to just getting out in the fresh air, walking in the sun, hopefully. The summer always makes me feel happy, so I'm very excited for the summer. And then obviously like my wedding, which is kind of trying to plan all of that still at the moment. I'm actually hoping to at some point to try and get back into work as well. So I'm at the point now where I'm 3 years ago I was still on chemo. So I'm sort of 3 years since it all. And I'm at the point now where I really want to try and sort of get back into something. I don't know what I'm going to do, but yeah, I'm at that point where I'm starting to try and live again.
Oh, that's so exciting, right? With the
Yeah.
marriage happening soon, and then trying to that point you're making about trying to live again and on your feet. No, it's really really exciting. And I think the last audience question we want to ask is where and how can people find you on social media?
Okay, you can find me probably mostly on Twitter. I am at the saltiest cow, or if you just look at salty cow, I am on Twitter. I'm always talking about cancer and late effects, lung cancer. Twitter is my kind of cancer land. There's an amazing support network on there of so many people, and it's been a real lifeline for me in some really dark times. And you can find me on Instagram. I think my handle is at Lizbro, Lizbro on there. So my Twitter one is really my only kind of cancer one. But yeah, you can find me on there, and if anybody ever wants to ever ask me questions about it, whatever, I'm always happy to talk to people as well and sort of share anything I've learned that can help somebody else. So for me, if I can help other people who going through something I've been through, and it makes it easier for them, it makes it worth it for me going through it. Yeah.
That's wonderful. I love that. Love the Twitter handle. And just thank you so much, Liz, for taking time out of your day to share your story with us and for all of the support that you're helping to provide with other patients and guidance throughout their journey. So we really appreciate the work that you're doing to help raise awareness about lung cancer. And thank you everyone for joining our podcast. Please keep an eye out for our upcoming podcasts and events, which will be listed on our website at www.alcsI.org. And with that, thank you, Liz, and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.